This episode of the Human Powered Podcast is proudly sponsored by Microsoft Surface for Business.
Welcome to the Human Powered Podcast, presented by Human Eye Solutions and XMA. This is the place where resilience meets personal growth. I'm Scott Ward.
And I'm Serena Kirsten. Each episode, we uncover the stories of individuals who have faced life's hurdles head-on, buck the trend of social trends, and emerge stronger. We're here to inspire, teach, and unlock the secrets to unleashing your potential together.
So let's get ready to dive deep into conversations that illuminate the power of resilience of the human spirit. Let's embark on this journey together. And today we're joined by Commissioned Officer in the British Army, Jo Vann. Welcome to the Human Powered Podcast, Jo.
Thank you so much.
All right, so Jo, let's get down to it, shall we? Netball became your thing that you became a world-class athlete in, and a very early calling for you, propelling you to some remarkable heights, not only for England, but for Team Bath. And, you have become a legend and part of the fabric within England netball's history. You swiftly rose through the ranks to become a troop commander in the British Army. Currently, you're balancing your life as a mum of two, and obviously, as a leader in the army with your role as a wife as well, and a pet to a cockapoo, which is interesting. You've got a lot going on. There's a lot of balls in the air for you, Jo. Your stories are compelling. It's compelling. It's inspirational. It's a story of breaking barriers and inspiring change. You are essentially a change agent for future generations of people.
Wow, I am absolutely honoured and humbled to be here. It's very kind. Thank you.
Living in a house of really powerful women, I think it's fantastic that they have people like you in the world that they can look at and aspire to. But thank you again for being with us today. I'm going to start with something that would have really pushed you mentally, physically and emotionally as a person. You were in the army on an expedition in the Alps. The group in front of you are caught in an avalanche, including your senior leader, who is severely injured. What's going through your mind at that time?
I knew there was a risk of avalanches by signing up to it. We did some training and we understood that we were controlling the risk and were prepared for it. The worst happened when we got picked up from the airport. We were on our way. The call came in to say that a leader had been taken hundreds of meters down the mountain in an avalanche as was under the snow. So the vehicle pulled over instantly. We knew we had a part to play in this evacuation by basically becoming the control point for all communications. And although we felt extremely helpless in the moment, we trusted that the team on site were doing everything they possibly could to find the casualty and dig them out from underneath the snow. So while all that was happening, all kinds of thoughts, fears were just running through our minds. But we each played this part in supporting what was a life-threatening situation in the mountains. What came next was an excellent rescue, and the individual had some great treatment and recovery in hospital. But what we needed to do was continue to take the baton on as part of that expedition. And what we had to really find was that courage, that knowing that risk was so real, that we could believe and trust in our training to overcome that fear.
I'm surmising, because of course Serena and I have never been in that situation before. There must have been a really powerful moment where you all looked around the van and said, we've got this. Because I suppose that's what all those hours, days, years, months of training has brought you towards.
Absolutely. We knew we had this, but there was no choice. In that situation, time is absolutely critical. You have less than 15 minutes to be able to find the individual to increase their best chance of survival. So, yeah, the pressure in that situation and adrenaline that was running through your body, even though you sat in a van on the side of the road, was immense.
Unbelievable. I literally can't believe what I'm hearing, and yet it's like watching Mission Impossible. You have 15 minutes before this blows up. No, you have life on your hands. It's just something that I could never envisage, and just congratulations to you all for finding the internal strength to get you all through that moment. It's amazing. And that leads us nicely into another thing that I've been thinking about is when I was reading up on your history again, whilst trying to keep my jaw shut in just pure amazement, I was looking at when you were all taken to Sandhurst to undertake sleep deprivation training. Most people listening to this will be whilst also wondering why. Can you talk us through that?
Yeah, so the purpose of the exercise was actually it had many different parts to it. It's a defensive exercise. So from a tactical point of view, we're there with a purpose. We're there to dig a trench, to set up a defensive position. Now, what came with that was, yes, we didn't sleep for a number of days. The longest period, I think I didn't sleep for about 5 days. And what comes with that is this unbelievable opportunity to learn about yourself, where you are in terms of mental resilience, how to pick up on signs in your team, what you can do to bring out the best in yourself, to really focus when things are incredibly challenging, and also bring out the best in other people. And I think one thing I certainly learned is the people that were given real clear roles and purpose thrived. It's if you get distracted and you get caught up in that defeatist attitude, then ultimately it's a downward spiral. But we really recognized as a team that we could help bring each other along, and with a sense of purpose. And it was you could see the tangible benefits of what we were doing. We were making tiny progress, but it was progress. And it's being grateful for, yes, we are getting there. It's going to take time, but we are getting there, and celebrating the tiny wins.
And you feel like, whilst it's obviously quite an extreme position to be in, and most people will never experience that, it's probably a very good reference point around creating very clear and distinct and yet simple instructions to people, which often we find when we speak with organizations and some of our clients, it's very easy to create overcomplicated directions to people for the fulfillment of themselves rather than the job at hand.
I completely agree. I think that was the point when I realized, when everything, your body is so fatigued, your mind, the only thing I can liken it to is being quite drunk. Like you're not really fully in control. You probably didn't hydrate enough, not eating enough. And that's a good learning point, isn't it, in terms of actual keeping your body going and trying to tune into being your best state that you can to perform. But in terms of the simplicity, that was really key. I think when I had to focus on what was a simple task, but it took all my energy, all my concentration to do something so simple, it was just focus on tiny steps at a time that got us through.
I want to talk to you about leadership under pressure, which I know you undergo a lot of different types of scenario trainings, things like that, within the army, of course, to make sure that your leadership is high quality under very intense situations. So, your journey from leading troops in Afghanistan to guiding young athletes and soldiers back home is quite extraordinary. I would love to know, can you please share some of your strategies for maintaining effective leadership under high pressure situations?
I think very early on, you put in a scenario where you can rely on your training, but ultimately I was the least experienced person in the room. I had some leadership training, but in terms of the skills required to do the job, I was surrounded by experts. And one of the most important skills I drew on was understanding the people in the team and helping them get into the best place where they could perform at their best, because ultimately that all helped us function in the best possible way as a team. I genuinely believed that no matter what we faced, we would find a way to come out the other side.
And I suppose it's that belief that you need, but it's almost actually an assuredness. It's like failure is not an option, right? We have to get through this, and success is life or death in a sense, isn't it?
Yeah, and you need that confidence. But there's also, I do believe, and I have probably since learned, that showing an element of vulnerability is a really positive thing. There was nothing to be gained by me suggesting that I had all the answers. We had a team of teams, so within that there were leaders. Everyone contributed. So being honest, being authentic, and being able to show my own vulnerabilities, accept that, and share that, yeah, I was fearful at times, I think helped that level of connection and trust that we had between the group.
That's great to hear. And I just want to move on a little bit. And I think what you're saying there around understanding role, being critical, but then I think what you mentioned there around the experts already being in the room and just creating this environment where, you need everybody to feel like they can perform and execute what they're good at and in their areas of expertise. I also love that that having no fear to be vulnerable under that kind of pressure. That is an incredible skill to have in terms of trusting one another and being honest with where everybody's at so you can actually get the job done.
I think some of that comes from being on a real journey personally with overcoming huge levels of anxiety, hitting points where I massively, as a child or going into my teens, really, really experienced this fear of failure. And part of that is being an athlete and striving for what at the time probably seemed unreachable goals. A number of experiences along the way where I had to teach myself how to deal with fearing failure and shift and learning about that growth mindset. There was one particular time where I think I'd had a really demoralizing experience. Didn't get selected for a team, wasn't performing in other sports I was doing at the time, was missing a lot of shots when I was playing basketball. And a couple of things happened to me. I had somebody introduce me to Carol Dweck's work on mindset. And when I read about it and I learned the difference, I had been living in this fixed mindset in some parts of my life. And when I could shift that into that growth mindset you talked about at the beginning, that unlocked everything that came next. And I think when you can look at it through the lens of vulnerability, it applies to all of that. If you can be so open to recognizing, okay, I could put myself in a place where I'm so vulnerable, or admit that I've made a mistake, or things might not go as planned or might not achieve the goal I'm going for. Ultimately, it's better to have tried. And in failing, it's just a chance to learn. And okay, you can go try again, maybe try again in a different way. So that learning for me and hearing about all the research about motivation, why we do these things, I was so grateful that happened to me early in my life, because I just felt that the door was open then to go explore, see what could be achieved.
How old would you have been at this time, Jo?
So there were 2 points. So one time I was definitely around early teens, where I remember putting some posters on the wall in my bedroom, and one of them said, "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take." And every morning I would wake up and I'd look at that. And I was surrounded by some incredible people at school. I had my basketball coach, Mrs. Gabatas, would turn up at playtime, and I'd be in the hall and I'd be practicing these shots. And it wasn't about the basketball necessarily. It was about training my mind to know that I needed to take shots. I needed to go for it. And okay, eventually I did start scoring them, and my basketball happened to improve. But it was that process of going for it. So that happened in the early teens. The exposure to growth mindset happened when I was 19.
The correlation of what you've just explained there to the story of you facing an avalanche as a team is pretty much the same, right?
Yeah.
You can just see that you've got that instinctive ability to confront challenges, but underlined with a huge willingness to learn along the way, whether that's a good or an uncomfortable situation. I think it's something that often I'm finding with having 2 young daughters growing up. Society doesn't encourage the girls. It's very much an encouragement for young boys, I'm finding. But for young girls, we don't use the same language. And I think for Serena and I, it's something we're trying to challenge out there at the moment is actually continuity of approach. It's just as important for young girls growing up that it is for young boys, but we need to accept that historically it hasn't always been that way. Otherwise, it will just carry on in the same vein.
Absolutely. I'm incredibly lucky. I feel so lucky to have a boy and a girl, and I absolutely relate to that difference in mindset and how they portray levels of courage and how they react when they say things like, "I can't do it." Just the simple thing of, "I can't do it yet." That's it. Minor change of, well, try again. practice will help get you there.
I want to just take you down the path now of performance enhancement techniques, which is obviously really key around, resilience, skill set training and capacity building. So you've obviously gone and transitioned from a world-class athlete into a commissioned officer for the British Army. And you've managed to operate at such a high level where peak performance is required time and time again over long periods of time. So what are some of the key techniques or strategies that you've managed to employ alongside your growth mindset and obviously trying to put this into your everyday living and the fabric of who you are? What else have you kind of done to do this regardless of your environment that you've been in? And you've been in obviously multiple environments, whether it's sports or obviously within the army.
One of the things I have learned I can get a lot from is just reflection. So being in the moment and learning from past experiences and learning from other people's experiences allows you to capitalize on the next opportunity. So what I find really fascinating and I'm really keen to break down barriers is when people get labeled or you label yourself. Like I sort of took on that sporting label and it happens, whether it's society, whether it's peers, whether we do it to ourselves. So I really do believe that it doesn't matter what the label is. You ultimately have a set of skills that you can apply in any situation. And I would say that now, even having the aspiration and the crazy idea of creating a business, that was something I never believed I had a skill set in. My family, my siblings have an amazing background in being accountants, and that was not my thing. I was into sport. So now I've got this crazy plan to go and challenge myself in a different field. All I need to do is draw on the skills and the resilience and the learning. That has been something I have learned through these other experiences that ultimately you can just take into another environment.
And that brings me onto a topic actually that I'm really passionate about, is looking at balancing that sort of high performance with also personal life. We've already referenced some imbalance that we're surrounded with. I think if you look at managing your demanding career within the army around commitments as being a parent and also a spouse, that really requires a unique balance. I think many of our listeners will be struggling with that social expectation that mum does everything. And even as a dad, you often hear dads referencing, oh yeah, it's my time for kiddie care. Well, no, it's your time to be a dad, right? It's not a job. This is part of your agreement, or to be a mum alongside another mum. What advice can you offer for people listening today around trying to manage that balance for yourself whilst also achieving your own personal aspirations? Because it's not one or the other, is it?
Yeah, it all comes together and it is so challenging. It's something that I continue to work on and aspire to improve every single day. It's as so many people listening will know, it's such a juggling act, no matter what commitments you take on. Whereas in the past, to get through a challenge, I just needed to work harder. I just needed to be stronger. I needed to train, and it felt like the more effort you put in, adrenaline kicks in and you get the results. What I've learned at this stage in my life is it's not about one-off performances where you then go again. It requires a state of self-regulation where I've learned that actually to be at my best, I need to be more relaxed. And it's incredible the support you do get in the army to realize where you are physically, emotionally. And when I have really, really struggled and allowed that level of stress to really compromise my own performance, I've had to just go back to basics and think, right, I need time to breathe.
So following on from what we were talking around that social expectation, we want to look at balancing high performance and personal life, looking at managing your career within the army alongside commitments as a parent and as a spouse. That really requires a unique balance. For our listeners, how have you done that? How have you managed that? And from all of these lessons that you've gone through in life, What tools have you picked up that offer you a point of reflection, or at least allow you to get through, let's be honest, some of these relentless and thankless tasks that you often are challenged with on a daily basis?
Yeah, it is so hard. I think I experience levels of self-doubt. I experience levels of guilt. That's a big one, I think, as a mum. I had the most incredible role model with my mum. She was always present. We grew up as one of 4. She had such a challenge to keep us all going. I want to be able to offer that to my children, but my commitments and choices, I recognize that just turning what could feel like a really uncomfortable, negative feeling of I can't be there right now for you kids is into something that is actually I could pave a way. I could set an example and I could show them that there are opportunities for them to go and do things.
I suppose, and everyone's a product of their own environment, right? So if you're looking up and you see your parents or those that are under your guidance, that anything is achievable, and actually it is difficult and you will be stretched, but it doesn't mean that there's not love in the room, right?
My husband is such a rock in this whole family unit, and he is incredibly encouraging. If I tell him an expedition's coming up, or there's a potential to go on this adventure and I could take a load of soldiers with me, thinking about this idea, it's like, Jo, you got to go do it. There's just no doubt. And there isn't for the family. And for me, there are some questions of how am I going to cope with time away? But I know that there's a purpose to what I'm doing. And I want to give those opportunities to other soldiers. I want to expose them to adventure, give them that controlled exposure to risk, which will help them develop and then be able to be even better at their jobs. So it's focusing on what is it I'm trying to achieve, and knowing that I've got this incredible family support around me to be able to make that happen.
And what I love, Jo, about what you're talking about is this, balance between progression, this progressive mindset that you definitely have, but then actually it sounds like you are fitting your family in and around that in a way that's actually growing everybody. So that whole role modeling piece, the stretch, comfort, panic kind of tool around the Crowdworks growth mindset. And actually what you're doing is growing everybody, not just yourself. And I think that's an incredible balance to be able to strike, but one that you clearly are managing to do. So what we're really curious about is your resilience recipe. We want to examine the secret strategies, lessons, or advice, I suppose, that has kind of helped you along your journey during some of your most difficult moments.
Yeah, I feel like sport gave me these opportunities to learn. I mean, I feel really grateful for the exposure that I had in my teens to wanting to perform at the best I could, because by doing that and setting goals, I had a framework to then realize when things were not going well, what do I need to do to progress? And there were 2 things that stood out for me, and I was taught really as part of coping strategies on court. And one of those was like this bin it strategy, which is you make a mistake, it could have cost the game, but in that moment, how do you move on? And there are times when you can go back and reflect on that later. But in the moment when the pressure's on and time is critical, you need to get your mind in that sense of, what do I do to fix it? What can I do to make it right or improve? So being able to not dwell on mistakes, park it and go, I'll come back to you later when I have time to learn from it. But in the moment, move on. And the second one, which was strange when I first started doing it, and it may sound strange to listeners, but it is self-talk. The people are aware of these negative voices in your head, and it's so important to not allow that to become your actual thinking. So just being able to replace those negative thoughts with a positive thought, like I really can do this. And that will help frame that belief to just go for it and have that growth mindset of, if a mistake happens, if it doesn't work out, everything's still going to be okay. I'm better to have tried than have not done it.
For me as well, that really goes back to that self-reflection piece. So what for me, what you've just mentioned there is an ability to detach yourself from that lesson. We'll reference it as a lesson. And also then, like you say, talk yourself through that process. I think we live in a world now where our success is developed by other people's expectations or what we see on social media. So giving yourself that time to sit down, have a chat with yourself, and actually think about, okay, what is good for me? What does success mean for me now in this moment? And maybe 2 steps ahead and not getting too carried away. I think it's something that's often lost. But for me, it's something that Serena and I often talk about. It's such a powerful ability to move on and to not dwell on those mistakes, but also really take them as an impactful episode to help you strive for more success in the future.
I learned about the difference between a hot debrief in the moment, just what can you learn, what can change now, and then that cold debrief of going back to it later. And there's such an opportunity to learn by going back to those situations. And I love what you talk about there is just pausing, like taking a sit down in a moment, write down your thoughts, because there are times now I still get overwhelmed with the scale of what some of the projects I might take on. Nothing that I choose to do. I don't choose to do things because they're easy. I choose to do them because they're hard and I can learn from it. And I really do think that can create this feeling of overwhelm. And by going back to the simple nature of writing down a list of what is important here. And my husband will say to me some evenings, he'll say, what absolutely needs to be done right now that will fall down if it's not done in the moment? So nothing. Like it's all in control. It can be done. Just take a moment, reset, and go again.
It's actually something we do with a lot of our clients when we're coaching or doing improv sessions. We call it sort of reverse engineering. So we look at what the real issue is, and then we take them backwards through the steps to either the point of causal impact or where this will begin. And it's such an enlightening moment because often we're flooded by the trepidation or the fear of the big picture. But actually, when you do dissect it into incremental steps, it's not very scary.
I love that. And I think that often what you think might have caused that feeling of discomfort or stress or overwhelm is actually not the feeling that actually is. And you get this perception of, I'm feeling like this because this happened. But if you actually pull it right back and address the root cause, it can really help all those feelings of stress just subside.
And on that note, what advice would you give to our listeners around realistic ways of building and sustaining that personal resilience amidst some of the inevitable ups and downs that you're faced with either in life, at work, or as being a parent?
I think my advice to listeners would be to pace yourselves. I've definitely learned that you can't just go hard all the time, and being able to self-regulate, take small steps, and be really kind to yourself along the journey, and equally looking back and make sure that you do celebrate the progress, because what you can easily get caught up in when you're striving for goals is just what's next. You achieve something and then what is next. But being able to take a moment to pause and reflect and celebrate how far you've come on that journey is one of the most important things.
So during this segment, we'd like to look at unlocking human potential. Can you share one major moment or lesson, insight that you haven't shared previously that you believe was pivotal to unlocking your own human potential? For example, this could be a mindset shift, a daily task that you now take on, or even actually refocusing your long-term aspirations. There must have been something that really elevated your own personal perspective on what you want to be.
So looking back, some of our netball coaches, strength and conditioning coaches, put us in scenarios which at the time felt, you'd question, really, do we really need to do this? And one of those was when you're doing a session, and it sounds really simple, but say we had to do 10 reps and we were absolutely given everything, nothing left to give, then immediately it was, you've got another 2 to go. Looking back, I think it's interesting seeing how people reacted to that. And although internally you might have that question over, I don't think I can go again. 30 seconds ago, I thought that was it. I'd push myself as far as I possibly could. But now, within 10 seconds, I've managed to find something more. And that was a lesson which I could apply to everything. It happened on an expedition. We were low on food, low on water, and we had injuries within the group. And we needed to move the rendezvous point for where we're effectively going to be able to get out of this situation. Once that call had gone in, we had no confirmation on whether the message had been received. Comms were down. We effectively, by making that call, had a worse scenario because you had potentially 2 different rendezvous points. And that question had gone from a mindset in the team from, oh, thank goodness, what a relief, we don't have to go as far, to now we've got an extended goalpost. We were tempted with that great feeling of it's going to be okay to we've now got to dig deeper and go again. So I think over those times, it can apply to everything. It's recognizing that when you really think you've given it your all, your mind and your body has an inner strength that you can draw on when you really, really need to. I apply that on a daily basis when I'm absolutely exhausted and I just feel like I need to go and get some rest. I stop and I think, actually, I could just do that one more thing, and that will clear it off, ready for the next day. And it just gives you that confidence in your capacity. And I think that if people listening can take that away to their environments and trust that your body's capable, your mind is capable. Often your mind will tell you first that you need to stop, but there is opportunity there to push yourself a little bit harder than you might think. And particularly if people have big goals, often there's a lot of barriers in the way to achieving those goals. So you can take each barrier at a time and address it. What I have noticed is that for some people, the situation has to get so bad to motivate themselves out of it to then go for that life-changing moment. And I think what my advice would be is it doesn't need to get that bad to draw on that motivation. Everybody, if they really look at themselves, knows they have something. They have something to give. They might be good at something. It might not be what they think is valued, but there's something inside themselves that they might have gained some confidence from. So what can they transfer into a new environment where they can really excel? And people, again, can be surprised.
I mean, I'm just slightly overwhelmed, if I'm honest, by just the impact that you've had on us today, Jo. There is a question I have because it's something in the back of my mind. Working in the army, I think it's fair to say that it's a fairly male-orientated environment. How have you managed to develop and most importantly, sustain your own leadership type without mirroring some of the habits that you've probably been brought within that environment? How have you managed to sustain that? I'd love to know more about that.
You're right, Scott. I am incredibly outnumbered. For a lot of people, the perception is the army is still a man's world. And what I love about my journey over the last 13 years in the army is actually how things are changing and how everybody is hugely valued. So yes, I have relied on a level of confidence and self-belief, which comes through training and trusting the training that the army gives you will prepare you to do the job. But I think ultimately it's staying true to yourself and knowing that everybody can bring a different style, a different idea. And what I love about the army is you do feel valued and you have a voice. So even in a room, I find I'm in times where rank is a thing in the room. You've got some really experienced and both very experienced junior soldiers and some very high-ranking officers all might be in the same room. There's certainly a space now for breaking down those barriers to value everyone's opinion. And as a woman, I think there have been times where people have actively sought my opinion and a different perspective, as people do in teams naturally. And it's a great environment to be part of.
And that leads us really, really nicely to something we like to look at called the human power. So Jo, we both like to really thank you for today. But we are going to ask you the most difficult question of today, unfortunately for you. What would you say is your human power?
I think my human power is my family. I think that genuinely they give me the platform and the connection and the resilience and the confidence to be able to be who I am. And from that, I feel like I have so many freedoms to hopefully go out there and make an impact.
I think there's so much, Jo, that I think people can, take away and start to really reflect on. So thank you for providing some incredible insights, actually. It's been really amazing to kind of listen to, one, your journey, but two, how you've started to implement some of the things that you've learned throughout your life. And in terms of some, key takeaways for me, in terms of what you've been talking about today is, we've all got to do hard things, because hard things is where you learn the most about yourself. And it's almost one of my favorite quotes around, are you alive, but are you truly living? And I think you're someone who has lived through some incredible experiences, successes and failures, and the way you've embraced that through doing hard things, I think, has been great. So I think that's something our listeners can take away. And what you were talking about around progress is progress and celebrating the small wins, I think, has been brilliant. And I think we can all take that away, whether you're a mum of 3 at home and you've managed to just get to the shops today and get a small bag of shopping, or whether you're a leader in a major organisation and you're going through a huge cultural change or a merger, progress is progress. And also celebrating all the skills you've gained in life. You've managed to, like I said at the beginning, you've transformed yourself, you've reinvented yourself numerous times, and you've not lost those skills. Those skills haven't gone anywhere. And I think your ability to take them with you and apply them in new contexts, I think, has been pretty incredible. So huge thanks for coming in today. It's been super insightful. You certainly make me want to be a better person. So I'm hoping you, as the listeners out there, feel the same and have taken some, great tools, tips, tricks around how you can apply some of Jo's journey and what she's learned into your own lives.
Thank you so much.
We truly hope that today's guest has offered you, our listeners, the opportunity to explore your own journey of self-reflection, personal empathy, and success. Remember, it's important to share your stories of struggle and success with those around you. Let's unlock potential together.
Thanks for tuning in to the Human Powered Podcast. It's been a privilege to share today's journey of resilience and empowerment with you. Remember, each story we share is a step towards understanding our own true potential. Follow Humanised Solutions on social media to become part of our growing community, and don't hesitate to share your own experiences. I'm Scott.
And I'm Serena, reminding you that within each of us lies untapped strength. Let's unlock it together. Until next time, keep striving, keep believing, and keep growing.
This episode of the Human Powered Podcast is proudly sponsored by Microsoft Surface for Business.